there's virtual assistants, and then there's like podcast people that are like, hey, you'll hire this company and they'll go get me on 10 podcasts a month.
Yeah.
I mean, they're everywhere.
Oh, I know.
And we're getting hit on constantly. And I found some diamonds in the rough, and people are like, wow, these are great connections and people we stayed in touch with. But most often, though, it's like, here's my client and here's all the stuff that they've done. And sometimes it's really good. It's not to say it's not.
Yeah.
But it's top 40 under 40. A lot of the stuff was pay to play, right? It was like a game. And then I go do a search on them, and they've been on every bogus podcast that's out there. Not everyone has a podcast, which I can talk about that, but like everyone that's ever had a podcast has already featured this person. It's like, and they're all saying the same thing. Like, how boring is this?
Yeah. The only way that I've ever taken on guests has been either people that I know, or I've asked for referrals from other podcasters who I respect. Like if you have almost like a podcasting group that you actually trust, in which for me, it was me, Dob Barron, which his shit continues to blow up. Oh, there's like 2 or 3 other folks that had just massive followings. We just would recycle guests, and we would just send them to each other like, hey, I got somebody for you. You need to go talk on this. And it's like that right there. It meant that I didn't have to do any work to figure out if this person was full of shit. Like if it was a referral from Dov, it was like,
But there is something to say, like, hey, if I wanted to hire, not me, but if someone wanted to hire somebody to go get them on podcasts, I understand the possible value in that, except that there's so many of them. And really, like, for example, we reached out to someone recently. They wanted to be on the podcast, but their whole thing was they've been featured in Forbes. They've been on Harvard Business Review. They've written all of these books. They're on Twitter. They have a following.
Hold on, you said they're on Twitter?
Twitter.
What the fuck? Wow.
Why?
No, I'm just saying, who gives a fuck? Anybody can be on Twitter.
Oh, please. No, I see what you're saying.
Work on your presentation. Sorry.
All of it was like bought. I could just tell, right? 6,000 followers and not one person likes one of their posts, right? I'm not saying that you have to have a lot of engagement. Just because a post has it or doesn't have engagement doesn't make it good or bad, right? I get that. When you have a book, you've written, let's say they read 7 books. You go to Goodreads, go to Amazon, you read the reviews, like 6 reviews. You go to Goodreads, they have like 8 reviews, and they're all 1 star, 2 star, maybe a couple 5s because they're friends, whatnot. It's really hard because when you take a few minutes to back check them, which does take time, you realize...
If a company were to reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a great guest for you for this podcast, and I'd be like, oh, either I'll ignore them or I'd say, really, why? Like somebody was wanting to be on the podcast for the Best Pandemic Ever podcast. Clearly, they hadn't looked to see what the podcast was about. They said, so-and-so is a business guru. He's done this and this, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like...
So you're not interested in taking people on the podcast that are reaching out to you that you don't know unless something catches your eye like immediately?
Yeah. I mean, the podcast hasn't been really active lately, which that'll start up again.
In general, like even in the past?
In general, no. In the past, it's like criteria. Are we recording this now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we are? Have we been recording this whole time?
We have. I mean, we might
so
not
when I shit on you for saying Twitter, that's... okay, good. Yeah. So,
but I can control the narrative. So like
that's
I can edit
good.
words out, and then it makes it sound like you're just, you're not one to work with.
Shit. So...
Hey, real quick, Content Matters with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing. We think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen, both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matters, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at kazcontent.com.
And I can use whatever language I want to on here. I'll try to keep my language clean.
That's good.
Yeah, cool. I'm not going to talk about anything inappropriate. It's for the children. So the question you were asking about is how I make decisions on podcast guests.
Yeah.
So I think the first criteria is this. Number 1, do I give a shit? Am I interested in this person? Am I interested in what they have to talk about? And would they be a good fit? Can we have a good conversation? And would they be something that other people would want to listen to? So I think that's the first thing is like, am I interested? And that sounds very selfish. A lot of people are like, well, you always got to think about what your audience would want to hear. And my answer to that is like, unless you're a Joe Rogan or a Gary Vee, you don't know.
Yeah, but even Joe Rogan, he's doing it with stuff that he wants to learn about.
Of course, absolutely.
Talk about it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which is what then attracts people that want to learn about that stuff too. Which I like Joe Rogan's podcast. I love it because it's a diverse conversation and there's no pretense of like, well, here's the answer. I just brought you on to confirm this answer.
Drop it, 12 times that you just came out with a new book that nobody cares about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I think being selfish on a podcast is important because the person, like, let's say you listen to our podcast, right? Like
I don't.
If we had a listener.
I would never. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If we did, And you happen to be one of them, right?
Yeah.
And you were interested in the same things that I was interested in, which you're not. But if you were,
I am.
You would be like, okay, I want to hear what Eric asked because
Absolutely.
that's the type of feedback that I want. So it's going, you're right.
Of course.
Like, how many listeners do you need? How many are going to be there? And what's the purpose of having them?
Right.
Maybe it's just a conversation like we're having now. No one's listening to this thing, right?
Oh no, I've been live streaming this on Facebook the whole time.
Right. But like we still had that conversation. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
That was it. And then might lead to who knows what.
Well, of course, that's what people look for is if I knew that you would ask the kind of questions that I would ask, or that you wouldn't let something slide where everybody else might let it slide.
Which you see a lot of.
Oh,
I'm going to keep interrupting you because, right?
Absolutely.
In this conversation, because
You can interrupt me all day long.
I know, because this is my show, not yours.
Definitely. I respect that.
It is, what were you just saying? I'm sorry.
Yeah. You felt like you had a real zinger.
No, I didn't have a zinger.
So podcast rule number 2 is if your guest can't actually throw zingers out there.
No, it's not a zinger.
Okay.
It's a thought. So sometimes you have to take time.
I don't even know what a zinger is. So
yeah. Well, you like, this is interesting where Lex Friedman, you ever listen to his podcast? So you had Elon Musk on.
Yeah.
They did this whole thing. And I was listening to it like the day it came out randomly. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to listen to what he has to say because it was like brand new. And if you don't listen to him then, the stuff can, be antiquated 3 weeks later.
For sure.
So he was asking questions like, when are we going to get to Mars? And it would be like, pause for 25 seconds. No words were spoken. That was awesome.
Yeah.
As opposed to always having to interrupt. It's just like knowing where that conversation goes. But sometimes it is because now I can take you down that path. Like we might never get back to here, but I think we can get back to there, right? The right person, the right conversationalist will get you back to maybe a point if it matters. If not, like, no. What you just said right there, let's move past it. The problem was I just forgot what I was talking about. So like, then that throws it off. But that's okay because that's a conversation anyway.
Absolutely. In about 10 minutes, you'll remember what it was, but then it will have no relevance to where we are in the conversation.
Or you bring it back up. I remember early on, I used to have a track I would go down and I would ask a question.
Oh, I remember.
And then I would try to transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say my transition.
You were working too hard.
And working too hard, but it's like a little bit canned and that's okay because I think you have to go through that process.
Yeah.
As opposed to navigating the different conversations.
Now you still don't have that country music as your intro though, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Oh boy.
Yeah. For one of the podcasts.
I'm done.
You don't like country anymore?
I never liked country. I'm just giving you shit.
My wife wrote that song, but thank you.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Did she really?
Yeah.
I'm glad you still have it on there.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
And I would just like to promote that song now.
It's good. Into an NFT. Yeah.
Now that's something.
That's interesting.
I talked to a really interesting guy the other day about NFTs. But before we say that, let me comment on what
I'll
you
make
were
a
talking
note,
about.
NFT, and we'll come back to it. But
yeah. Did you know how to spell that?
I did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, you're
E-N.
Yeah. E-N-E-F.
Forget. You're going to forget your mark. Go back.
No, I'm not going to forget. This is good. What was I saying? No, no, it's you were talking about trying to get back to a place where you could allow things to just carry on. Like you can enjoy the silence. You can tolerate the silence. I think we're already there for most people. So number one, when you get into creating content, there's a bunch of these spoken rules that are based in some reality, but they try to blanket them across for every type of content. And that is like, hey, people's attention spans are like 15 seconds. It's like, oh, you need to capture somebody's attention. Oh yeah, 15 seconds is probably, I think it's 1.5 seconds. So there's this, nobody's going to want to listen to a podcast for more than 30 minutes. I'm like, bullshit. The podcasts I listen to are all over 30 minutes. If it's less than 30 minutes now, I'm like, it's probably nothing good that I can really get out of that. Ironically, a lot of the stuff that's on my podcast is less than 30 minutes because most of it is audio extracted from video stuff that I put out there.
Right.
That's different. Yeah. So that goes to this point too, is that there's different purposes. There's different reasons for doing things, but we're so inundated with information, stimulation, media, all of it, especially since the pandemic. I mean, you pretty much have a captive audience. And so everybody's on their phone, everybody's on Zoom. And it gets to a point where this constant feed of information in short little snippets, it drives you insane. I think for most people, they want a 3-hour conversation, right? Like Joe Rogan's not successful because, oh, well, Joe Rogan. I mean, you hear him constantly referenced when he started this podcast, it was kind of a joke.
Yeah.
And that was years ago.
Yeah.
And it was really for the single intent of like, I want to have people on who I find interesting. And it's not like Joe Rogan was this big famous dude. I mean, sure, yes, Fear Factor and whatnot, but he was just one of millions of other people that had a TV show, and millions is probably not right, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
But he followed this as a, hey, I want to have these conversations with interesting people to answer questions for myself. And more people started listening. And then it grew into this thing. And that is his primary mode of operation now. And to me, it's like that. Why does he have the largest following in the world on a 3-hour podcast? Well, all those rules that everybody's told about podcasting and creating content don't apply there. I think simplifying and coming back and saying, like what you asked me in the beginning is, about criteria for a podcast guest. That's why I've defaulted to, well, if I want to talk to them, that's number one. If I don't want to talk to them, I'm not going to have them on a podcast. Because really all they're doing is asking for me to publicize them and push out their stuff for free. And I'm like, no, man or woman or whatever, not going to happen. It's like, if I don't give a shit about your stuff, like what? No, like podcast should be a time for us to have a conversation. Let's connect. And if we can't do that,
hire a marketing company.
Then, hire a marketing company. Yeah, like if it's the Best Pandemic Ever podcast with me and Paul Tulin, like we have people on there we want to talk to.
Just plugged your own podcast.
You like that, nice. Didn't you?
Yeah.
Didn't you?
That's
yeah.
Fair. You
it was good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a great podcast, by the way.
On Apple, on Spotify.
On Google Play.
Ooh, Google Play. That's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, we're on OnlyFans too. No, just kidding. We're
Google
not on
podcast, it's called now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's all video, but it's whatever.
Okay.
So the point is that, but like on that, if somebody who's a business leader that we like and we want to have them come on, there's never a like, hey, can we get on here and promote your book? I mean, maybe at the end we're like, hey, look, why don't you tell people how they can connect with you? And that's that's a courtesy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're organically incentivized.
Yeah.
Like that, organically incentivized. I just made that shit up clearly. Organically incentivized, but the sentiment is there, meaning that I want to genuinely.
Yeah, authentic.
I would say that I'm not really incentivized. I'm compelled.
Yeah.
I'm organically compelled. Let's go with organic. Yeah, I want to. I want to do it. I'm like, I like this person.
Yeah.
And I really want to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't rocket science, but these are some of the things that I've just learned over time of creating massive amounts of content.
Yeah. I think when you talk about attention span, I find it funny because so my kids were staying with my parents. We're down in South Carolina. They're staying with them. And they're like two of our listeners, my mom and dad, right?
Right. Yeah.
Of only listeners. But they're binge watching Arrested Development. And so they come back and they watch 2 episodes. And apparently, and my parents probably hear this for the first time, right? They were like, that's it, right? We're done. And my kids were like, what do you mean we're done? Like, we're binge watching. Mm-hmm. Like, binging doesn't mean 2 episodes. Binging means like 6 to 15 episodes. Who knows? Seasons, right? And so it's funny because like the attention span of the Gen Z, for example, our children, they say it's like, and it is short, right? I get that because you can go to TikTok and I'll get to that in a second maybe. But the attention span is they can sit there and watch Arrested Development for seasons in a row, no stopping. What kind of attention span is that? I get it. Maybe you're talking about the hook. How do you hook someone into it, right? When you read a book or watch a movie, like they got to pull you in immediately. Your attention span is going to be lost if you, like, remember in the 80s when the music would play and you would listen to 6 minutes of credits and then the movie would start. Like kids today are like, what are we doing here? This is taking forever. Let's get the story started. But like in attention spans and watching shows like Game of Thrones, right? I mean, all these shows take forever and they're watched 6 episodes in a row.
They're like long movies, man.
Right.
Wonderful long movies.
So what does that say about attention span? So listening to podcasts, and I don't think there's an answer, right? Because we have a podcast, we have a long form conversation, right? We'll extrapolate out of that other podcasts. So in every podcast, there's going to be a time, because I'm interested in it, is about content, about podcasting, about marketing, about whatever. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that for 7 minutes, for 15 minutes, for 4 minutes. We'll pull that snippet out and put it on our Content Matters podcast. Yeah. That'll be short, 7, 14, whatever minute episodes. Well, because it applies to that. But it came from something like long form, like you said, pull that stuff out. So there are ways to keep it short.
Oh, yeah,
but it's like
definitely.
There are no rules. Like it's going to that movie Bohemian Rhapsody when they're talking about like, this is it, 3 minutes. That's what they want. They don't want a 7-minute song until they did.
Right.
And nowadays it's like, man, you can be anything, do anything you want to do. Right. So I don't,
Well, I mean, when it comes to attention spans, I think it goes to, as human beings, we're vicarious creatures. We do have long attention spans. If it's something that we want to get lost in, when you look at these short little snippets of things, those are platform specific for social media. And social media is designed to be quick hit, short-term attention span, getting pieces of content. That's it. Like I don't go on to LinkedIn to spend 3 hours. Everything that's there, the whole mechanism is scrolling.
Right.
All of it.
Hits.
All of it. That's it. So it has a different environment. And so if you're going to create content for that, then you have to create content for that environment, obviously, right? But when it comes to a podcast or getting lost in seasons of Netflix show, that's different. That's an escape. So one helps us to almost zone out, and the other one helps us to get jacked up in a weird way. They're like a dopamine hit, like, oh, cool. Okay, well, this is great. Or one is like, I'm killing time, where another one is, hey, I'm going to get lost in something that is not the world I'm living in.
But you could get lost in something, let's say it's educational. You can get on YouTube and go watch professors or lectures on stuff that, like, when you think back to being 13 or 20 years old, and like imagine sitting there for an hour and listening to 7 of them in a row.
Oh, I'll do you one better.
Yeah.
Check it out. I'm going to pull this up on YouTube right now, and anybody listening should go check this out. Okay.
No one's listening, but yeah.
Yeah, no, they will. So for the 3 people listening, I find this to be incredibly relaxing, and I'll try not to keep the volume down here. It's got an ad. Obviously, I'm not paying for premium because
you should.
All right, so this guy, so it's Lone Wolf 902. It's got 224,000 subscribers. This video here is called Winter Hot Tent Camping in Snow and Freezing Temperatures. Look at this, man. Like, it's just
him out there.
It's just him for 58 minutes. And he's not like talking to you and like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this. Like, he's doing it. Right. You're watching it, and you're watching this experience.
Yeah.
I was like, this is really relaxing.
Yeah.
And I'm learning something. And that's, you would think, who's going to do that? Guess how many views this guy has on just this video here?
1 million.
287,000. And he posted it 5 days ago. 5 days ago, 287,000 views on that. Yeah, there's other ones here. There was one I watched, and I'm pretty sure it was in Japan. Same idea. He just lives in a van, and you see him kind of doing all of his stuff. Never says a word. Had like 13 million views. And that was like an hour and a half. So you tell me.
Well, what's interesting, though, is you'll hear people shit on that.
Yeah.
And you'll hear other people love it. So it's for the right person. If you don't like Joe Rogan, or you don't like listening to 3-hour podcasts, then don't do it.
Yeah.
It's amazing, like, because you'll hear like, I can't believe kids today make money off of YouTube. Why? Why is that such a negative thing?
Kids have been making money off of YouTube for like 15 years now.
No, I know, but it's really starting to come mainstream. People are hearing the stories about it. Like, that doesn't make sense. They're not working. Did you realize the effort that goes into it? Like, if you watch a kid go through that process, because they've all done it, right? They've all done something. I think it's amazing. Like, they're building little businesses. Like, one of our clients, were talking to him, his son's building a YouTube page for the games that he's doing. And he's all excited. And his dad told him, he's like, you're building a business. He's like, I'm building a business, Dad? He's like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God. That's amazing. And the dad's excited, kid's excited. He wanted to create some swag, right? He had some hoodies and but people are just confused by a lot of these things.
Well, because it violates the traditional ways of like how you earn a living. The latest videos that I've been doing, they're a lot more, there's a lot more to them. The actual shooting of the video itself is the easiest part, but it's all the stuff I do in post-production. Is like, this takes so much freaking time. So I think about kids that are putting out videos like almost daily that have high production value. Yeah. I'm like, holy a lot shit, of work. Man. I know how much work.
How do you get better at something than just doing it, right? So we've been out here I've been writing a lot, doing podcasting, and you were doing podcasting before me, right? You were one of the people that said, no, you should turn the mic on. You're like, well, that's crazy. Why would I do that? I don't want to hear myself talk, let alone let someone else hear me talk.
Yeah.
But I think that is part of it, to like, you iterate. That's the one thing that I've like, when running a business, creating content, just constantly iterating to say like, oh, the stuff that you've done before, like I was talking about earlier, when you're asking questions on a podcast, well, you become a better question asker,
absolutely,
a better listener, a better conversationalist, better communicator. Maybe you better at building relationships, worse at talking, apparently. But like, that is something that is a part of it. So imagine starting this off at a younger age. But I've seen it where like high up, whatever that means, right? People who have been successful or CEOs of large companies go through this process of creating content and start somewhere and then grow with it. I've also seen people do it and not see the, what the word is, the return on investment on what it is. And like, well, what did they have in mind for that? Were they trying to sell a widget? What was it, right? But like, you've been creating a lot of content. You've said to me numerous times over the years how it's gotten better, how it's getting better. And you won't even look at your old stuff because you're like, oh man, it would make me cringe.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, if you're going to create content, we're going to just bring this all back to, what's in it for me? That's the people say, well, you always have to ask, what's in it for me? That's what your audience is like. No, you yourself, the content creator, have to ask that question too. What's in it for me? And I say that because we're talking about what kind of guest do you want to podcast, somebody that you would be interested in talking to. What I try to think through is anytime I'm going to put a lot of time and energy into something, I have to ask myself, is this a one-off, content specifically, or if it's a product or a course or something like that, is this a one-off? Or is this something that can be scaled? can be repurposed in multiple different venues. And it's rare, if ever now, that I do something that's just a one-off. It would have to be something I'm just really passionate about. And just says like, this has one home and that is it. But that's rare. So it's not just about like, well, I'm going to create content that can go in different places. So that's one part of it. The other part is to ask yourself, I'm going to do this thing here. Let's say I'm going to start shooting video. And its original intention is to put my ideas and thoughts out into the world and to attract people to work with me. But then you also have to say, well, what are the second and third order effects of that? Well, if you do it on a regular basis, you're going to get better and better at video. You're going to be more critical of yourself, which again, the hardest video to shoot is the first one because you're just going to hate it and you're going to hate your voice. You're going to hate the way you look. I finally got to a certain point. This was when we were creating the Foresight Academy and I reshot that thing 3 times before it ever went live. And I had students already in it and they were like, the first version was fine, not for me. I thought, this is garbage. And so I shot the second version. I was like, oh, this is still garbage. And it wasn't until the third one that I felt good about it. And now I'm getting ready to redo it again. But that's, because it's 5-6 years old. So all that said is that I got to a point when you're shooting so much, and a course is a great place to learn this, you can remove yourself from the person on the screen and be more objective about it and go, yeah, like I'm not looking at that going, oh my gosh, I look so, no, I'm just thinking like, nope, that missed.
That is early that you do have that. I had that.
Yeah.
Right. Listening. I couldn't listen to myself.
Right.
Now it's, oh no.
Yeah,
I can listen and I got to speed it up because
definitely
when you hear yourself at 1x speed, that's a problem. but yeah. And I think like when you do that, right, a lot of the ideas, having a podcast, writing, creating videos, whatever, doesn't matter. You go get on LinkedIn and Twitter again, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can respond to stuff and you're just working through your thoughts. You're iterating right then and there.
Good. Yeah.
And I think like, I used to have these ideas and I'd be like, okay, here's the name of it. Here's the tagline. Here's a description. And I got to make it perfect. And like, it fits in a box and you put it there. And I was like, and I would have trouble with it.
Yeah.
But then I realized like, okay, here's an idea. Now I can go talk about that idea.
Yeah.
And I can go bring on people in and around that idea to talk through it with. And then all of a sudden the idea comes out, or it's not even the idea comes out. Now there's 26 pieces of content related to podcasting,
That's
related
right.
to, we mentioned the word NFT, related to COVID, whatever that is, all of a sudden, okay, well, you've got a lot of stuff out there. And then it's up for the person to like reach out and say, I want to be on your podcast. And then it's up to us to say, I don't think
Not
so.
happening,
Just
dude.
because you're on Forbes, just because you're in Harvard Business Review, just because you wrote your books, doesn't make you like, oh, I should be delighted. I should be honored that you even reached out. Now, there are times when I've gotten people to reach out. The author 80-20 sales principle. I was like, I read his book 7 years ago. All of a sudden, he's reaching out to be on the podcast. That's intriguing. That's different. That's like, oh, wow, he's not reaching out unless we have that podcast.
You found value in him 7-8 years ago, for sure.
Right.
So it's like, oh, this is great.
This is cool. Now I can like apply it to today. But I think like just talking through those different topics and having that serve as your content and like, what's the return on that? How would you ever know?
Oh man, well, I can give you like an example of return is that being a guest on a podcast, I was referred to as a guest before I was ever podcasting. I mean, I had my own podcast, but it was just, again, it was little snippets of stuff. It was just me talking for 3 to 5 minutes. But I was referred to be on a podcast that had a really large following. And then that host referred me to Dov Barron, right? So this was, it was Chad Barr. He referred me to, Chris. Well, I hate this because I can see his face. I know him well. Anyway, he was on Voice America, and we were on that podcast. And then he said, oh, I need to introduce you to Dov. And he introduced me to Dov, and that just like everything kind of took off from there. So the return on investment is that you're building relationships.
Like real quick, let me add to that.
Yeah.
So you meet Chad.
Yeah.
So my daughter, my middle child, she got bat mitzvahed, who was the canner for the bat mitzvah because,
Laurel,
these organized religion and these facilities here, they have these certain requirements that you have to follow. Yeah. And you have to show up on these, like, first of all, it's all changed since COVID. Yeah. Right. Of course, they had to change. This is right before COVID happened. Yeah. All that changed. Well, I needed somebody. Yeah. I wanted someone that we had a connection with. Yeah. Turns out she's from Cleveland, Ohio, where my dad's from.
Yeah, go Browns.
Right. She studied with the rabbi that my dad knew
when
he was a kid. So all that connection, Laurel Barr's here, and she taught my daughter how to speak Hebrew.
Oh, that's
through
so cool.
Zoom.
Oh,
it's like, think about those connections.
Yeah.
What's the return on that? I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah, man.
I just know that was an amazing experience. We had family come in from out of town, and everyone loved her.
Yeah.
We loved her. I mean, it was amazing. And it was because like some sort of connection that you had with someone. You said, oh yeah, you should reach out to Laura. It wasn't like any intent.
Yeah, Chad's
and
wife,
you're not looking for something. Maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe you've been holding back.
Oh yeah, no. I've got a laundry list of requests. I'm like, I'm going to cash that in. Yeah. Wait, so you guys actually get together and meet her in person now?
No, she came here. She came to Charlotte.
She came here. She came to Charlotte and didn't reach out? Oh my God.
She was here for like less than 24 hours.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. All right. Laura,
she's busy, obviously.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I need to get back in touch with Chad too.
I get it. Networking goes back many years, right? That's why people join country clubs. My grandfather joined a country club and he had to drive from Niagara Falls to Williamsville, New York, which is just a suburb outside of Buffalo. But there was no throughway to get there. So the drive to get there was took this long. Well, there was no email. There was no social media. So if you wanted to get around other people and you're in the insurance business, well, you got to get in your car and drive those places. And it might take an hour. Yeah. It's just different. We can have a conversation with someone in Cleveland, Ohio, someone in California, someone in Belgium, and things have changed and it's changed so fast in all of this. And it's just moving really fast. Yeah. Like, I don't even know where podcasting goes from here because it had changed, like, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like where we are today and where it's going. And now there are a lot of people with podcasts. I've heard the number's 2 million. Yeah. I'm sure it's more. Yeah. Most podcasts are not active.
Right.
And what's the ultimate end goal of someone having a podcast or having a YouTube channel or having a website and having all of these things? And it's just makes you think.
Yeah, it does. That's really cool. I didn't know about that. That's a great point. But that's also how human beings operate. That's how we evolve and we thrive. We're genetically designed.
It just happens faster than it did before.
Yeah, I guess I'd want to think about that because I hear everybody say that too. It's like, we make these connections faster, but
the initial connection happens faster.
Sure. Yeah. It's more like I become aware of you as a person on earth.
This is a small world. All of a sudden you start having, you're like, wow, this is different, right? Like you meet someone and you're like, oh my God, we're from the same hometown. And you just didn't know that.
Well, I think, the other thing too is that we still, no matter how big the world is or how small it seems that it is because of social media, human beings, we still operate in tribes, right? So the story like with Laurel and, Chad, and I was talking about being introduced to Dov and I could really trace, I've told people too, some of the most significant people in my life today, I can trace them all back to Dov, for example, right? Well, I never would have met Dov if I had not been on Chris's podcast, if I had not been introduced to Chris from Chad, who was also on that podcast, right? And then that's how with you and Laurel, when you have these small groups of people that you trust and you're actually paying attention to what it is they need. As I was talking to Laurel when I was spending several days up there with Chad and Laurel, learning more about what she did. And then, of course, you and I being friends, which you still haven't admitted publicly. I hope you do so on this podcast, but it's neither here or there. But, in my hope that you would be my friend one day, I knew that was like, you guys should meet, you should connect because I knew that was something you were looking for. But I don't do that for everybody. I have to have like a deep enough, more intimate knowledge of you and what's important to you. And
that takes time.
And that's where like a smaller tribal type of setting is. It's like family. We do not have the capacity to know what's important to everybody. I mean, I have 11,000 some odd followers on LinkedIn. How many of those people do I actually know? Not that many. It's a handful, right? Yeah. So we can be aware of each other.
It takes time. It's not a transaction.
It's not.
And I know you've been in the insurance business.
11 years I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I get it. There's relationship building in all industries, right?
Oh, yeah.
But in many points in that, there's a transaction that's taking place.
Sure.
And the transactions are very different depending on what insurance industry or what branch of insurance that you're in. But I always found it interesting because it was like, how many policies did you sell this month? Mm-hmm. It's very different than saying, I'm going to build a website. I'm going to put some content on there. I'm going to have a blog. I'm going to do a podcast. Maybe I'll have some social media. It's very difficult. I get it from many business owners' perspectives or someone who's like at that entrepreneurial mind, even if they're like, hey, selling real estate, it takes time. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned it before, like, is the ultimate goal to get clients to come to you so they buy from you? Maybe. It doesn't have to be. Like it could just be, I just want to learn new things. I'm exploring. I want to discover something that I never thought about I could discover. And by having these conversations when everyone's phones are put away, I can find some stuff out. But like, it's been interesting because I still have that business, but spending a lot of time in it, it's very transactional. Yeah. And while it's the relationship, it's very transactional.
But the transactional side on the insurance business is always at the end. It doesn't mean at the end of a relationship. It's that.
Right. Because you usually buy it multiple times. I get all that. But there's no, like on a podcast, I get it. If you're building a podcast to have an audience to then sell ad space to.
Yeah.
That I get, that's there. I'm just talking about like, if you're just having a conversation, where does it go to? Right? Like it might lead to no business at all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a hard time saying, Why do you spend any time doing that? How does that lead to anything?
Yeah, well, I would say this. I was told this early on when I moved from the insurance business to consulting, advising, training, teaching, all that. And that is that you want to build your body of work. So you want to create something, do a podcast, do videos, blog, write. You're building a body of work. And there's no downside to that, unless you're just measuring like, well, if this doesn't turn into a piece of business, then it's not worth it. Well, yeah, it's a short-sighted view. But if you have an entire body of work, if something, your work and your value and what it is, not just your ideas, but your capabilities, they're on full display. And that's something I think people forget, is that, for instance, if you go to my site, and I don't have any of the old videos up, but I've shared those with some folks that I've helped when trying to talk them through communicating and creating a video, for example, which is not my primary business, right? But it's just one of those things of, hey, here's how I learned. They're always like, well, it's going to look so bad and this and that. I was like, let me send you my early stuff. It's still up there on YouTube and whatnot. I said, it's garbage. And they're like, oh, well, this wasn't so bad. I was like, no, just listen. It sounds like I'm saying something. Can you tell me what I'm talking about? Because I sure can't. I'm not saying shit. I'm just using a lot of big words and being vague about something. It's like, you have to be okay with it. Like, you have to create shit to get to the good stuff. The stuff I create now, I mean, is it the best it will ever be? No, but it's really good. And I have no qualm saying this. Like, I spent 5 years overhauling my business, creating a digital side of the business to learn. I know how to create courses, to create automations, build in mechanisms. That's not my business, but I wanted to understand this. I wanted to master these skills. Now, ironically, they may come in quite handy, externally from my own business at some point. But it's also something that I knew that if I can create this, it also raises the perspective or the perception, better yet, of somebody coming to the site to better understand who I am, what I do, and why and if I'm the person they should engage with. Because we still are very much, hey, first impressions. This is where that 1.5 seconds of attention span comes in. That's really the attention for your first impression. So if you create high quality stuff, or if they come there and they like what they see real quick, then that may get them to stick around for a 3-hour conversation, right? Maybe that leads to business, maybe it doesn't. But I have yet relationships that are more than just, yes, there's definitely relationships or conversations you have with people and you're like, hey, go nowhere. And by nowhere, I mean, you never talk again. And that's fine. But those are few and far between. The more honed in you are on the kind of people you want to be around, I think that becomes less and less of a problem. I think that's been my experience. And I have yet to see any relationship that falls into that category where we still have many conversations. That always grows into something else. It's an introduction somewhere else. You're in the psyche of the other person and vice versa.
Well, there's a belief in whatever it is that you're doing, because that's the difference. I have a product here and I can sell you that product.
Right.
Whether I sell it to you or not, I can go to the next person, I can sell them a product.
Sure.
There's a transaction in there somewhere. Eventually I'll get it, right?
Yeah.
If I talk to enough people. In this, it's even a longer term belief. Like, you might be doing this for a long time and it's not really going anywhere, but you believe in it. People are telling you maybe they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the system that you have in place. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right? If I say, no, I don't want to talk to you just because you've been featured in all these things before, you could be offended. Chances are I would suggest that they just move on and go do something else. Like, why are you wasting your time? Right? Just continue on. But I think there's also this, when you create your body of work, it's the ultimate back check, right? You apply for a mortgage, you're going through underwriting. They have to check your background, your finances, all of these things. Content is your back check. It's your personal branding or whatever word. I know that's a bad word, whatever it is. If I can understand, like, if we're producing a podcast for somebody, I could sit there and tell them what we do and how we do it and all these types of things.
Exactly.
You know what? Here's episodes we've done for ourselves, for other people. If you don't like it, then I would suggest don't call us back. If you do like it, then let's talk. And it's not for everybody. And we're not trying to work with everybody.
Exactly.
But what an ultimate way to show proof of concept.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
And that's how the content, and you don't have to do podcast production to show proof of concept, but you can talk about whatever it is. If you're an attorney, if I could hear your thoughts on these legal matters or these stories, like, what better way to do it than reading about things that you believe in and think about? And that gets to learn more about you and how you think about things. And a lot of times there's a tie into that. Yeah. Like you mentioned the Cleveland Browns earlier, but it's an ultimate icebreaker.
Yeah.
Even if I hate the Browns, I could be a Steelers fan, right? There's this terrible towel in here. That's Shane and Mitch, right? They're the big Steelers fans. But that is the icebreaker because we can talk about that.
Of course.
And maybe I am a Browns fan. Well, then we have something in common and we
Are you a
can
Browns
catch
fan?
up on the Browns. My dad grew up in Cleveland, right?
That's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
You like Baker? Do you want Baker to be the quarterback?
All right. So great question. Yes, I do. And the reason why is that the Browns have just been cursed for as long as there's been a Super Bowl.
So is there a curse you think that's real?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like Erie.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Buffalo
know.
Fields with a curse too.
Interesting.
The hex, they call it.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Now I need to go find some content on YouTube or something about this. But
yeah.
I think the choices they made in bringing Stefanski in was a good one. I do. I'm not a master or a...
No, I get it.
But I am a Browns fan. It's like, and I'm definitely a Browns fan.
Holiday in last night type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want them to be there. That was the question.
Absolutely. I do.
Answer.
Yeah. And, I think, yes, did he have a bad year? Yes. I also think he was playing beat up bad.
Yeah.
And the reality is like, I think there's a rhythm because, the year before he was doing great. They went to the playoffs.
Yeah. He was hurt this year.
Oh, God. He had like 4 injuries. Yeah.
He jumped up. So he was like considered maybe a 5th round draft pick before his last year at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
He has an incredible year. Wins at Ohio State, plants the flag, the whole thing, gets drafted number 1 in the state of Ohio, which I think is interesting. He went 1. Sam Darnold went to the Jets at 3, who's now in Carolina, who's terrible.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
Number 7 was Josh Allen, who's the Bills quarterback, who's been great. So it's like, and then Lamar Jackson went, 31, 30, whatever it was.
Now that guy's a freak of nature.
He is a freak.
But he's not a quarterback, though.
But he's been in the playoffs multiple times, and he's got a good organization. Baltimore was the Browns, right?
Baltimore.
So we can talk about that. But
no, we don't need to talk about
Art
Modell.
That's hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
Those people make those decisions. They got to live with it. That's a big decision. You took him number 1.
Yeah.
If you're wrong and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are out there, and you could have had either one of those guys, and you don't have them, and those are the guys that are some of the best players in the league right now.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to live up to.
But how are you going to know that, right? Because, Sam Darnold was number 2, and everybody's like, this guy's going to be it.
Right? The situation for both, they're all on different teams with different coaches and different teammates.
There's so many factors go into it.
He was the wrong pick. Let's just say that.
Who, Baker?
Yeah, I think he
could
was.
be.
Yeah.
It's also, I think it comes down to the Browns had to completely...
Just like I think the Panthers trading for Darnold, I think it was a terrible trade for them to bring him in, and they're a disaster right now. But now they need a quarterback.
They brought Cam Newton back. It's like, what the...
Well, because they just had to sell tickets, and, they already said goodbye.
Yeah. The crazy thing is being a Charlotte resident, and I love the city of Charlotte. I give 2 shits about the Carolina Panthers, but that's because I'm a Browns fan, right?
Most people don't care.
I know. Isn't that sad? And that's a problem, right? So you go to Cleveland. Cleveland has a terrible record. But it's like, same with Buffalo.
It's history.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's generational. How many generations of people have lived in Charlotte?
Good call.
Second. I know a lot, but
yeah. But it's a good point. It's a transit city. It's a banking town.
And the team didn't come here till 95?
Right, yeah.
It's there. The Hornets.
Just got some time.
Do you ever watch Hornets?
No, but that's a legacy team.
And I don't care if you like basketball, whatever. Because if you go to certain cities, they love their team.
Oh, for sure.
You go to Sacramento, they're diehard Kings fans. Kings haven't been to the playoffs in since the early 2000s, probably.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
It's generational.
Yeah.
And it's transient. So people are from Cleveland, they're from Pittsburgh, they're from Buffalo, they're from Wisconsin, they're rooting for the Packers, right? So it's it's a challenge, I think. You love the city of Charlotte?
I do. Okay, let's say this. I need to qualify that. Being an Army brat, I didn't really fall in love with any of the places. I always enjoyed the places I was at. But Charlotte's the first place, and this could also be because of the kids. Charlotte's the first place where I haven't felt kind of the itch to move again. If you grew up in the Army, it's just in your blood. You want to move. For us, it was every 6 months to 3 years. Obviously, kids kind of keep you more anchored and weighted. But no, I think Charlotte's a cool place. We used to live in Raleigh. We lived there for 6 years. That was a cool place too, but I like Charlotte more.
I was just in Raleigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took my daughter, went to a Carolina Hurricane.
I wouldn't recognize it anymore. Oh, the Hurricane Stadium. That's...
Yeah, that was fun. But we weren't there for long. But it was cool. Raleigh had something where there's no craziness. Charlotte, I just feel is always turned on. Not like New York City. I'm not trying to compare it to LA, New York. But Charlotte's there's just always something not happening. There's just traffic all the time now, right? To get a reservation at a restaurant, you can't just do it the same day usually.
Yeah.
You have to plan ahead a little bit.
So you're telling me in Raleigh, because from what I've heard, Raleigh was crazy.
I was there for 24 hours this time, so maybe that's not a fair assessment. So yeah. So people are complaining about Raleigh too?
Oh, well, yeah. Back when I was there, we left in 2012.
Yeah.
And I knew the triangle inside and out.
But even going to a game, it was just manageable.
Well, no, I think a lot of that probably has to do with COVID protocols.
That's true.
Now, interesting, in the city of Charlotte.
Throw everything away, throw all the stats out right now.
Yeah, I would do that. And I think that they would be much more, I think it's just more of in the atmosphere and
Well, people are moving around Charlotte, Raleigh, Austin, Miami, Nashville, all these cities. I mean, these cities are going crazy because people are like, why do I have to live in Chicago? Crime capital, very busy, terrible weather. New York City, tomorrow. San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Great city. I love Chicago. But people are like, why would I pay all these taxes? Why would I?
No kidding.
The politics are terrible.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy yesterday. It's like the public schools have sent all those kids back virtual. I'm like,
you serious?
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. At the beginning of the school year, just a couple of weeks ago.
Beginning of the year, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The mayor was like, we do not need to go into remote, learning again.
And they did.
And then the union voted 75% or so voted to go back remote. And I was like, this is such bullshit. I was like, this is ridiculous.
It's tough on the kids.
Yeah. I mean, because that's some real data. That's real data. You can look at negative impact. I mean, just in Charlotte alone, when COVID first happened and we all went remote, which again made sense because we're like, what are we dealing with? We have no idea. Right. Now we know. But so we have no idea. So everybody went remote. Just in the city of Charlotte, I think there was about 10,000 kids in CMS that were lost.
Yeah.
Just dropped off. There's no tracking mechanism that was their place to go. Right. I mean, South Carolina was even worse. Now, this is in our area here, but I mean, you think about Chicago, you think about a lot of these other.
Yeah.
Geez, man. Yeah. What a hot mess.
Yeah. It's a mess. Back to Charlotte.
Let's go back to Baker Mayfield. All right. Talk to me about Charlotte. Well, I think Charlotte's a great city and it's a great city, but it's one that honestly, I have not really injected myself into, most of my business I do out of town and I have to stop sometimes and think.
It's an epicenter. And I think like what you said before, like not having an itch to move is home. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. Yeah. I think sometimes it's like, oh, what do you do in the city? It's like you talk to people from New York City and they lived there for a long time.
Oh yeah.
How many shows do you go to a week? I haven't been to a show in 5 years, they would say, or I don't know. Like we go out to the same restaurants that we always go to, which is no different than if you lived in a neighborhood in Charlotte, you'd go to those same places, right?
Yeah.
So Charlotte it could just be home, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It is home.
Just a lot of people coming here. Real estate is becoming very popular, very expensive. The roads, the city was never built to handle this many people. Like I remember coming through Charlotte being younger and it was either Charlotte or Raleigh if you're making your way down south. And mostly Raleigh. And then it became Charlotte when US Airways came. And we would come and it's like, what goes on here?
I know. Well, so you felt like you're always hitting the outer edge of the city and just passing through. Like,
you just go right through it, right? You go to the airport, you see it off in the distance and like there's a picture of the Charlotte skyline. It was nothing like that. And it continues to grow. It'll be interesting to see, because we're talking about like the Panthers, the Hornets. There isn't an appeal in many ways to those teams because it wasn't given to you from your father or family,
which
or
is
your
why I'm a
grandparents.
Browns fan, because my dad.
Absolutely.
I have no connection to Cleveland.
Like my son roots for the Bills. He's never lived in Buffalo a day in his life. He's visited, but he's just into it because he sees it. He's like, this is fun. I want to be a Bills fan.
Yeah.
I want to lose every
There's
week.
There's a legacy there.
A
tradition. Yeah.
Does Charlotte in time become that? Not necessarily with the sports teams, like whatever, but do you think enough people stay here, or is it continue to be transient to where like Charlotte's more still a stopover city? Like eventually it's like, I'll go to Charlotte for 20 years and I'll move to Florida, Arizona, or California, or back to New York City. I don't know. Like, and that's a prediction. I'm like not saying like, hey, what's the future for Charlotte?
So let's compare it to, let's take it like a city like Buffalo or Cleveland, since we're talking about the Bills and the Browns.
Yeah.
Or you could take New York or San Francisco, any of these cities that have...
people immigrated to those cities.
Well, that's true. Right. So if we think about sports teams, like when you think of Austin, what do you think of?
When I think of Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Longhorns, country music.
Yeah. Music.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's strange, right? You think Nashville, you think of music, right? You think old country music. But Austin, what's in my mind when I think of Austin? Music. Why? Yeah. South by Southwest.
Yeah.
The music festivals that go through there.
Not anymore. You don't.
I know.
The last year, I think Tech City.
But that's the history that's rooted in my understanding of it. Like, how did Austin become the place that all these folks from San Francisco migrate to?
Taxes or lack thereof.
But Texas is big. Why Austin?
Yeah.
Well, Austin for years and years and years was attracting people from the outside to come and visit for these festivals.
Right. The arts.
Exactly. So they started to cultivate a sense of place, and they started to cultivate, something of value that was unique. Like, we're bringing all these people, we're showing you something that's really great here.
Yeah.
Charlotte needs to do that. And if they are already, and I'm just not aware of it, then great. But
they voted down the art bill, I guess it was pre-COVID, so 2-3 years ago. There was an art infrastructure bill, and I couldn't remember what it was, and we could look it up and whatever. But it was a tax to make the arts
Was
more
that the 1
pronounced.
cent tax that was?
I don't want to start quoting stuff. It's been a few years, but they voted it down. Now they have arts, right? They have a performing arts theater. They have the Mint Museum. They have different things, but it's like, have they like to the next level to where you go out, you're just inundated with the arts and you don't feel that here. It's definitely more than it was. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah.
You know, like I think about San Francisco. When you think about San Francisco, you think Silicon Valley.
Yeah. But now you think of homeless people.
Exactly.
You think people robbing stores.
You think of Get Out, right? You think of like crazy.
Yeah, before it was like, if you want to be in tech, if you want to be, you have to move there.
And Silicon Valley's whole thing was like, we are shaping the future. We're changing the world, right? Now they're all moving down to Austin, but Austin has more of this. So you're starting to see this sense of place and this culture develop out of something that they planted a long time ago. And so again, I could be wrong on this, right? And I'm always open to being corrected on these things here. But from what I understand with history, you know, Charlotte's been a banking town. Charlotte is a financial hub, right? So you don't really think like, ooh, culture. You think transaction.
Right.
So I think that's part of it too, is that people is like, hey, this is money. We're going to come here to make money. Going to come here to work and make money, raise a family, great. But there's nothing like deep that makes you like, oh, I am passionate about Bank of America, right? Or Wells Fargo. You know, it was like when we were in the insurance business. Right. You know, I mean, I was passionate about serving my clients. I was not passionate about selling insurance. Yeah. That just happened to be the mechanism that allowed me to help and serve people. Yep. So I think for Charlotte, what would be really interesting to see is what is that sense of place that makes people think, man, my life would be awesome if I lived in Charlotte because those are my people, right? Austin, that's easy. You can see that in Austin. Even you don't have to have it like so dialed in. It's just like, you just kind of know like, oh yeah, Austin, that would be cool.
The problem, I feel like, and I don't know who's making decisions, the people, maybe it's the people in politics, are selling out because they can make money. Oh yeah. We will sell you this land, just build whatever you want.
Oh yeah.
And we don't care if it's going to impact the roads or the schools or the hospitals or the crowds at restaurants or whatever. Yeah. It's like, just build it. Build 500 more houses. Build another plaza. Yeah. Right? You get on Providence Road and you got Ray Farms. You got, it's bananas now. And it's, you know, and I'll give them credit. Like, they're well done places. Oh, there's beautiful. A lot of good options in there.
We got some incredible developers here. Yeah. But who's living in them?
But the roads are, well, there are people there. Those townhouses sell out like immediately because people want to be there. It's convenient. You never have to leave. Ray Farms is going to have a.
I dropped my parents off at the airport just 2 days ago. I hadn't been down to downtown Charlotte. Yeah, it feels like in a year and a half.
Yeah, it's uptown.
Oh, uptown.
Yes.
Pardon.
Yes.
I hadn't been to uptown Charlotte. See, look at that, right? So what do I know? But I was amazed. I thought, oh man, this is starting to look and feel more like Atlanta. Yeah. Which I've driven through many more times in the past year and a half.
Yeah. It's developing. It's just crazy. Yeah. South End, Plaza Midwood, Noda, right? Yeah. There's these different places that you can go to and you get a different feel and a vibe in all these different places. And so I think that's interesting. The sellout though of like, but it's impossible. You can't park anywhere. You can't do any of these things. So it's like Charlotte had that. You could do those things. You could still get around. It's like in that cross between. So what do we do about it? Like that's the question maybe going forward and like what happens? Because the schools have a problem now.
Well, for sure. I mean, all the construction over here on McKee Road. Yeah. So, you know, my kids go to McKee Elementary. Right. And right across the street, they're putting up a charter school. And that is like, can you imagine the insanity of morning traffic there? It's going to be a nightmare. I mean, it's already bad as is.
Well, right down the street, if you go down in Union County a little bit, you have an elementary school. Oh, yeah. You have two charter schools. That's one's a Greek school and one's, right? And so you have three schools and not major, but you have intersections in the morning. And I've just heard it's just crazy.
Oh, dude. Like, I've only made
Weddington, Waxhaw used to be true suburbs. Yeah. You get outside of it. It's peaceful. It's quiet.
Oh, yeah.
Those are great areas, beautiful trees, all of the stuff. Yeah. You get out there at the wrong time of day, it's madness.
Man. You can't get at it. Yeah, you're not going to go anywhere.
So now where? Right. Mint Hill, further out. Like that's the thing that Charlotte does have is you can continue to go outside. Yeah. But then like that's when you go to Chicago. A long time ago, we were thinking of moving to Chicago. Chicago was awesome, right? And all these towns in the city, right? Yeah. All city areas. But people move outside of the city. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're like now an hour outside of Chicago. Yeah. So you can be an hour outside of Charlotte. And there's nothing wrong with it because like a lot of the secondary cities. So instead of living in Denver, Colorado, people live in Boulder. Yeah. And they'll go into Denver once a month.
Great city. Both of them are.
Yeah. But it's just different, right? So I don't know what happens.
No, Atlanta's a great example of that too, right? I mean, if you're not from Georgia and people ask you where you're from and you're from one of the surrounding towns in Atlanta, you just usually say Atlanta.
Right.
But if you were to say, oh, I'm from Lawrenceville.
Right.
Where's that? Oh, it's in Atlanta.
Right.
Right. Or
Alpharetta.
Alpharetta. It's Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, but it is, right? It's the same kind of idea. Just like Matthews, Mint Hill, all of those, you still say Charlotte.
Striking distance to the bigger city.
Big time. Yeah. That's
exactly
right.
I don't know what happens with Charlotte. I just know a lot of people are coming here and it's not stopping.
Yeah.
And I think you make a good point too of like the finance market. Like when I was working here, I didn't want to work for a bank.
No.
I had no interest in working for a bank. And so I woke up one morning and my company got bought out and I was working for a bank overnight.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because everyone worked for a bank.
Right.
And that's changed now. Right. So you're getting a lot of different companies coming here. So I think, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's going to draw companies here, obviously, is the tax incentives and things like that. But what kind of culture grows up around that? I mean, does it just become another big transient city?
Right. Public transportation, Charlotte, the light rail.
Yeah. I mean, where we used to live before we moved to Matthews was up in the university area. And I mean, that was like as we were leaving, that place is blowing up.
That's a different
some
city.
of the best like restaurants are up there now.
Yeah.
But it's also is where when you look at Charlotte's like murder rates and everything else, those were outside of our neighborhood. And in that area up there, the university area, that area had the highest crime rate.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the case is now. But I mean, I love living up there, really close to the Harrisburg border. Like, Cabarrus County is beautiful. You just get further and further out.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I mean, that's a really good question about like, what is Charlotte? I think that is a question to explore and say, what is the sense of place here?
Yeah. They have the plan, like Plan 2040 or whatever it is. I don't know if you've seen that. You should look it up.
I should. I'm a futurist. I should scrutinize it and then blog about it.
Plug back to your futurist self.
But you like that, huh?
2040 and like what the design is. And a lot of people wanted to change, and I'm not an expert on this plan by any stretch. So I'm absolutely getting it wrong. But people wanted to bring low-income housing.
Mm-hmm.
They want that in Charlotte. Yeah. What happened was they started building this plan out, and they're like, no, I want it, but I don't want it near me.
Oh, yeah. That happened right by our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big fight about that.
Yeah. Careful what you wish for, right? I mean, it's dangerous. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I think that's, it's kind of, it just goes to show is like you can have strong beliefs and ideologies, but are you going to actually, do what it takes to, if you're trying to like better the community,
right,
help other people.
Yeah.
That's nothing new. We're not new on that. I mean, that's was it the Not in My Backyard?
Yep,
folks.
Oh yeah, okay. So how do you feel in this? Maybe the last part on Charlotte. One other thing I want to bring up: you go to an intersection in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
You get to a red light, and there's someone walking, man or woman's walking, and it's not just any red light. The big intersections in Charlotte have it, like every single one of them. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't have it, but every major intersection has, call them panhandlers, homeless people. Whether they're legit, not legit. I don't know. Sometimes they work for an organization, right? And maybe they're not homeless. They're handy. I saw people just at the intersection over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with it. I don't understand why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It bothers me. I got kids. So sometimes I'll pull up and I don't feel nervous or threatened when I'm there, but I have talked to people who do, and they don't like it. You can give them stuff, right? If it looks like the part and you want to help them out, you got an extra bottled water. That's great. But like maybe your daughter's driving down the road and hits the red light. Like, is that something you want her to be around? Not at all.
Concealed carry,
not
baby. Even
close.
Get your concealed carry.
Okay, fine. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. But like, why? Because you talk about Austin, like they had people living, like people were going there and like, this is a disaster here.
That's what I heard.
They've taken care of that and they've gotten them in hotels and all this stuff. But like Charlotte, overnight, maybe it wasn't overnight. Maybe it seemed like during COVID or pre-COVID. And I get people fall on hard times and all that kind of stuff. But like, they're doing nothing about it. Mm-hmm. And there's people at these intersections. And not only that, it's litter. There's just stuff. And when they're not there, if you just happen to miss them, all their stuff's still there. Yeah. And it's not just their stuff. It's the stuff that they've had throughout the day. And now it's just become a place for litter. And so what happens is you get new people driving by there that aren't a part of that. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, well, there's stuff on the ground. I'll throw my stuff out on the ground. Oh. So all of a sudden, Charlotte is known for this very clean city, great looking city, very green, like very blue skies, the whole thing. It's like, there's trash, there's homeless people around. Like, I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what you make of it.
At least around here, I don't see too much of it. I mean, I see panhandlers. So I see a little bit of a difference. Panhandlers and then like a homeless population. I don't see too much of a homeless, like there's no tent cities around where. No, right. In fact, I don't even know if there are in Uptown. I don't know about tent cities, but you'll see. Yeah, and you'll see that in every city, even before the pandemic.
To get more ingrained with the city, go to the different South End, Plaza Midwood.
Yeah, I've been all through those.
But keep going and see what you see, because it's changing fast. Yeah. And you'll see people sleeping.
We should do a riding podcast where we're just in the car taking notes, like talking.
Carpool karaoke with a podcast.
There you go. Yeah. You sing, I'll film. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the panhandlers and stuff.
I don't think it's a great look for the city if people are coming here.
But it's also not unique to Charlotte. I mean, you're going to find that in almost every city.
You are. So that's the question. Does that come with the territory?
Of course. Okay. I think it does. I mean, I think the reality is that people are people. I mean, my wife is a social worker. I mean, and she was working with the homeless population. What she came to find out, this is when we actually lived up in Boone, is that a lot of people lived on the streets because they wanted to, and I say they wanted to be on the streets, meaning that they had the option to stay in a shelter or they could have gotten temporary housing. Now, a lot of these folks have mental illness, like diagnosed.
Right.
There's a lot of extra stuff that's there. It's not just a financial
Which is a bigger problem.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is not just Charlotte, right?
No, God, no. Yeah. It's everywhere.
And it's only worse now with COVID.
But she would have conversations with individuals and she came to find a lot of them preferred to live on the streets or preferred to live in the woods, like when we lived up in Boone. I said, that's really interesting because I think for us, we will always step back and go, gosh, poor person. Why can't somebody just give them a house or a place to stay? Yeah. Well, there's resources for days for that. It's just much more complex.
Yeah.
So I don't know that you'll ever get rid of that. And I think the question is, are they hurting you standing there? I mean, I've never seen any of those people act violent.
I get that. But then you could say like, kids used to go to school and really didn't have to worry about things happening while they're at school, like violence, like guns and stuff like that. Yeah. So things change.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or someone's drunk and they walk in the middle of the road while you're driving, it's a green light and you can't get out of the way fast enough. Then what happens? Whose fault is it? My son was doing a report and he talked to a police officer. If that person steps off the road and you hit them, it's your fault.
Yeah, I know in North Carolina that like if you rear end somebody who slams on the brakes,
right?
Yeah, it's your fault.
And there's no answer, right? Maybe.
This is the thing too. And I think COVID has really taught us this as well. We've all lost loved ones during the pandemic, whether to COVID or to other reasons. We have for sure. And I think one thing that really comes out of a lot of this and that COVID has maybe taught a lot of us, whether we want to admit it or not, is like, you know what? Life's fucking short. It is. And I think that we've overemphasized safety on so many levels way before the pandemic that it's creating an epidemic of mental illness. And I'm not talking about the kind that like makes you want to live on the streets. I'm talking about deep anxiety, depression, and loneliness and just fear of everything. I mean, good Lord. I mean, parents today like freak out over everything. I mean, I'm a parent of 2 kids just like you, right? And I can see my wife and I'll argue back and forth on this, but it's just this overprotectiveness that's in the atmosphere. And kids are safer today than they ever have been, but we act as though they are in constant danger. Like, don't let your kid ride to your friend's house on their bicycle in the same neighborhood because a pervert might pick them up. Not going to happen.
Right.
Like, I mean, sure, it can, but the odds of it are so low, but we act as though they're so high because we've given into this. And I think that at a certain point, we have to just realize that, you know what? There's only so much that you're in control of. And if we focus on those things, we can focus on those things. Can I solve the homeless problem in Charlotte? No, I can't. But show me somebody who can. And if there's something I can do to contribute to that, great. Now it's actionable.
But I do think dialogue helps
on
any of these topics, whether you're talking through your anxieties or fears or what your children are going through, right? Or if it's talking about like, what are the things that we're seeing out here? Because because I don't know who's doing it. That's the thing. Like, I know there's people that are doing it, but I think the dialogue matters.
Yeah.
Whether it's talking about mental health, which we're doing on one of our podcasts, whether it's talking about these things, right?
Yeah.
I think you had mentioned this a little while ago, open to changing your mind.
Yeah, of course.
I think there's a lot of, in business, like if we're doing podcast production and I'm not here to convince that person that that's what they should do. That's not what this podcast has been about. It's not what they're about. It's about a conversation.
Yeah.
If someone's not willing to change their mind, I'm not interested. Like I remember at the time, like selling insurance and we'd be at a meeting and the husband would look at the wife and be like, if I die, she'll just marry somebody better or maybe I'm not someone better. She'll marry somebody else.
Yeah.
And she'll be good. And it's like, so they're questioning it. I don't know why I'm here. I'm not here to convince you of what you need to do.
Yeah.
But I remember that happening multiple times. I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
If that's the conversation that you're having, then that's the conversation and you don't need me. I'm not here to convince you otherwise. I think it's very strong to be open to changing. It doesn't mean you change your mind every time someone comes up with a new idea.
No.
But to have dialogue, to think like, okay, well, you raised some good points about panhandlers on the street. Okay, well, I'm not sitting here and I didn't have like this thesis around it that I need to go change it, but it's just like, okay, it makes me think. Yeah. So I think all of those elements things that we can utilize to figure out, okay, well, how am I thinking about that?
Yeah.
Who else do I want to talk to about that?
Mm-hmm.
Where else can I create more body of work as it relates to that from my own thinking, right?
Wow,
so,
nice,
but I thought that's an important line that I wanted to bring back up that you said.
Yeah. I mean, geez, the worst place to be is when you think you have it all figured out. Yeah, I learn every single day, like, I don't have it figured out.
Yeah. I mean, keep iterating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always keep asking more questions. But no, dialogue's important, obviously. But sadly, it's something that we just don't seem to have much of.
Unless you do a podcast.
Why don't I do a podcast?
No, unless we do a podcast, you can have a dialogue just like this.
Oh, yeah, because I would never talk to you otherwise.
Yeah, you just want to be my best friend.
Not best friend. Just friend.
Okay.
Totally different.
It's a different thing. BFF is the next level up. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate it. It's good.
This is fun.
Let's do it again.
Yeah,
once a week. Of course. Commitment. That's what we look for. Yeah.
So would you say publicly right now that we are friends?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Then no commitment.
We'll say bye-bye.
All right, bye.
See ya.
One of my favorite things about CADSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at cadsource.com. Thank you for listening to this CADSource production, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. Content Matters with a Z is our content marketing company that helps entrepreneurs tell their own stories to those who care. And here's the thing. We think every entrepreneur that is willing should have their own content platform. And we want to help make that happen, both by working directly with entrepreneurs and by sharing our own stories, exploring the craft of content marketing. Content Matters, one piece of content at a time. Learn more at CAScontent.com.